low-end RDNA 5 avoids VRAM supply issues, VRAM capacity issues by simply using the laptop memory. But by 2027, laptop memory will be as fast as GDDR6. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. This episode is brought to you by JLC PCB and their Flex PCBs that you can get 10% off on right now. And then CDkeyoffer.com that gives you 3% off all of the games they have on their website with offer code DieShrink. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Been a long work month, I will say. I'm getting a little exhausted. I was actually thinking the other night, by other night, I mean last night, that we always, me and you, Dan, take like the last 2 weeks of December off. Sometimes a little bit of the beginning of January. Depends where exact dates fall. But I'm like, maybe I should start taking like the second half of August off. Just go full European and, not work. Because
it depends on the year, I suppose, yeah.
Because I have to say, people tend to not be watching a lot of videos then, and it's like all this stuff like it's a real thing I've been thinking about. Like I could put out, if I wanted to like die of exhaustion, probably 5 major Intel and 5 major AMD leaks next week, and there's just no point if people aren't back at work or school. And by back and work at school I mean they're back at work and school, so they don't want to be working, so they check the news often, and that means you will get more views. You know what I mean?
As opposed to go outside all day or something.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I guess that's where I'm at right now, Dan. Tired and thinking about how to organize my future work schedule. How are you? Well, you said you're doing well, but how well? Like how's the dog? How's the weather? How's the north?
Pretty good. Weather is pretty good, I guess. It's a nice 60 outside right now, so.
See, this is the rare days where I am jealous being in Nashville of not living up north, because it's like it felt fantastic today at like 86 degrees, cloudy with breeze.
A chance of meatballs? Oh.
No meatballs today, actually. Damn. For the amount of times they've been forecasting it raining over the past week, it hasn't really rained at all, which is nice. But I will say, it's funny how 86 degrees here feels amazing compared to 100 degrees 1 week ago. So it's like, well, I might as well be 65 with what we're used to here.
Most things feel better than 100 degrees, to be fair.
Yes, most
earthly weather patterns feel better than 100 degrees. I mean, I suppose you could be on the surface of the sun. That wouldn't be very nice. Or you could be in a nebula. Whoa. Now,
for those wondering, Dan's background, no, he is not using an AI background of the Milky Way or whatever it is. What he has back there is that will light up eventually, and he will be able to control the colors like I can. He has just not finished setting all of that up. But now we at least have something but a blank wall and something that helps muffle the sound. And, well, not the sound, the echo a little.
Yeah, hopefully the sound's a little bit better. I'm not sure yet.
It sounds great to me. I don't remember it being a big issue before, but I'd say it sounds a lot like how I think I sound when I'm recording, and that there really is no reverberation.
Yeah, and now I don't look like I'm... hopefully I look less like I'm being held like captive in a safe house or something.
Yes. All right. Let me see here. Before we get to the main stuff, though, I do want to put out an FYI. So, this is being recorded, you are actually watching this, Hot Chips will be going on. This was, of course, one of the conferences I actually went to physically in 2019. It's actually a big deal for the channel, as I was one of the only people that live streamed the Zen 2 presentation by Lisa Su. I think I was the only one who did. And so though it was incredibly low quality and at a weird angle looking upwards towards the stage, that was the only way to watch it. Also, I was able to record an interview with Jim Keller and Raja Kaduri. And I guess they just didn't think that maybe someone would record this thing that they were trying to make behind closed doors. But of course, that's still on the YouTube channel as well. So it's been a long, what do I want to say? Tradition for hot chips coverage on this channel. Although it's very funny or sad, really. I went to it physically in 2019. I actually did
what
that.
Happened in 2020?
Yeah, in 2020 that stopped happening. And since then it's sort of evolved into Carbon Cry, who is a team member of Moore's Law is Dead, covers it directly, and in a lot of depth, like putting slides up on a dedicated channel on the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, detailing and adding like adding a bit of depth to what they're talking about. Like they say this means this. Carbon Cry will say, well, that would also potentially mean this for this new CDNA thing AMD's working on, answering questions of the Moore's Law is Dead community while the live streams are going on. And all for free if you join the channel for like $2.56 or something. So I guess I'm putting that out there that some of the conferences will be over, some of the conference and some of the presentations will be over by the time that you're watching this on the public feed on YouTube or something, but not all of them. And the big graphics ones with Nvidia and AMD will be on Tuesday as well. So if you get up Tuesday morning, or you have gotten up Tuesday morning, I should say, and you're listening to this right now, join the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon at the second tier there that gets you, second lowest tier, that gets you access to the Discord, and you can have all of this coverage as well. And even if you miss some of the hot chips coverage, you can go back and read through all of it. We pin it and archive it on the Moore's Law is Dead Discord and special channels, so you can go back and look at all of the coverage, and you'll still be able to submit questions to me and Carbon Cry, where we will do an exclusive to the Patreon podcast about all the presentations at hot chips as well. So I thought that was a good thing to put out there, that we will be covering hot chips in depth when this comes out. You'll be able to go look at it if you join the Patreon afterwards, and you'll have a couple days to think of questions from me and Carbon Cry, and they get access to that bonus Patreon episode. So, a plug for the Patreon, and just a reminder to everyone who's a fan that we are doing hot chips coverage. It's just evolved more and more because it's a niche thing that doesn't get a ton of clicks, but the biggest fans like that. It is just for our biggest fans. We reserve it for that. Speaking of Carbon Cry, though, he did submit a correction, as he often does. He says, in Broken Silicon 320, Dan called Bud Light a Budweiser. Bud is not a Budweiser, though. And I'm saying it is a grievous insult to real beer culture. Budweiser is a city in Czechia, one of the historic beer making centers. Well, Budweiser, the real one, is far from the best Czech beers. It is too sweet and causes bad hangovers. It sure is still miles better than whatever mass-produced swill you Americans call Budweiser. Note that while Pilsner is also a toponymy, oh boy, here we go, coming from a center of Czech-German beer-making tradition at Pilsen, the usage of Pilsner is fine, as that also serves as a name for a type of beer. Also, he's making sure no one gets mad at him in the comments about that. So, what do you want us to say, Carbon Cry?
I'm going to fight back and say I was probably just referring to the brand Budweiser, not the brew of beer Budweiss, or whatever they call it there in Central Europe, where I hear they might make beer or something there. I don't know. I've never heard of is there
Germans and other Europeans never tell us that they have a beer culture.
Yeah, is there like a big festival around this time of year somewhere in Central Europe about beer? I don't think I've heard of it before.
Well, and joking aside, I do think this was a forced opportunity for Carbon Cry to say Bud Light sucks, which on the one hand,
sure,
Carbon Cry,
it does.
Come on. On the other hand, like Dan just said, we're not going to argue with that. Okay. I mean, absolutely. I don't even know what you're talking about with some of these beers. I'll trust you. It tastes better. Everything tastes better than Bud Light. I agree.
I agree too. I will say though, I don't even remember. Did I call Bud Light Budweiser though, or did I just say Budweiser? Because I will put my foot down. If I just said Budweiser, I didn't say anything wrong, man. And I'll die on this hill.
I won't. I'm going to say I don't care at all, and we should just move on. But let the record show that you can submit corrections, and we have nothing to hide, and we admit when we're wrong, even if it's about how we talk about beer. Remember, you can submit corrections if you join the Patreon as well. All right, let us now move on to story number 1. Upcoming Valve Fremont console surfaces on Geekbench, quoting from Tech Power Up before the editorialization. Valve might be gearing up for its next big piece of gaming hardware, codenamed Fremont, and earlier benchmark leaks give us a first detailed picture of what's inside. The system showed up on Geekbench with a custom AMD chip, saying that it was from the Hawk Point 2 family, built on the Zen 4 architecture, which was produced on 4 nanometer process. It looks to feature, well, actually, I think it would be 5. Well, no, it would be 4 nanometer because it's the APU. Because, anyways, it looks to feature 6 cores, 12 threads running at 3.2 gigahertz base, and with a boost frequency of up to 4.8 gigahertz. Graphics power comes from a Radeon RX 7000 series RDNA 3 GPU, likely offering a big step up from the Steam Deck's older RDNA 2 setup. In Geekbench 6, Fremont scored 2412 points in single core and 7,451 points in multi-core. Interestingly, the tested unit only had 8 gigabytes of RAM DDR5 5600, less than a Steam Deck 16 gigabytes, yet still nearly doubled performance thanks to the newer architecture. Yeah, I have a lot to say about that soon. Anyways, though, at times we have said that competition never really dies, it just changes. If today we have companies A, B, and C vying for a market, well, if B and C fall off, that doesn't necessarily mean that A is going to dominate just because B and C are gone. It often just means a more enticing market is there for a D to enter into the fray. Today in consoles, we see Nintendo increasingly isolated in their own walled garden, not dissimilar to Apple's position against PCs, frankly, and Xbox struggling to stay relevant at all through a yet another identity crisis. Fortunately, it seems a new challenger is appearing, though, to kind of de facto replace Xbox and console gaming. As Xbox lends their name to a handheld to compete with the Steam Deck, Valve Fremont, a SteamOS home console, has popped up challenging Xbox. We've heard rumors of Fremont for some time and covered them before. Now we know the performance ballpark of Valve's entry to the home console market. 6 Zen 4 cores, 32 CUs of RDNA 3, so around 4060 performance. The leak benchmark shows just that, a cut down laptop CPU, which is a refresh of Little Phoenix with a 7600 GPU. But, and this is a big but here, are these really the final specs? I mean, that article, and I'm jumping in here from Carbon Cry's write-up, I mean, the way some of these articles are talking about, it's weird it performed this well despite a weird amount of RAM. It's like, yeah, it's almost like this probably won't actually be the final console. I mean, they could be, I guess, if there was some deal with AMD, but more likely this is just some either misreading of a dev kit or a dev kit that was put together with parts that are cheap and easy to get in mass to approximate the final performance. Just offering a similar architecture with ballpark performance is often a good proxy for before final silicon is ready. And the final thing I will say about that is I don't remember the validity of these, like if this was finally confirmed with someone. I should honestly ask someone if this is true. I probably do have enough connections where I could at this point, but I don't know if you remember, Dan, before the PS4 came out, there was this like 670 Crossfire with an APU leak where they were like, is the PS4 going to Crossfire low-end graphics cards or something? And they were like, that would make sense. That's almost what the PS3 did with its almost APU plus a GPU. The answer was no. It was just some weird way that Sony decided to approximate PS4 performance. I believe also early PS5 dev kits had those weird ones with the crazy looking jet engine looking intake, which apparently you can buy on eBay now from someone, or you could at one point, I believe. That they used 5700 XTs, or I believe 5700s, and then they overclocked them to 2.2 gigahertz, which for those who don't remember is like 10 to 15% faster than those could usually hit. So they took golden samples of a 5600 because they're the same amount of compute units, overclocked it to the moon, and put insane cooling on it, and that was the dev kit. But that one couldn't even do ray tracing, so the devs didn't even plan for that early on. That's what I think this is, but I don't know. What do you think, Dan?
I mean, yeah, I can't imagine it would only have 8 gigabytes of RAM. I mean, the rest
or use RDNA 3.
Yeah, use RDNA 3 doesn't make sense. I mean,
Zen 4 APU.
Maybe a GPU that's, I guess, close to that level of power wouldn't shock me if, like, a later version of it.
Yeah.
And like, this is really meant to just be like a $300 like little like this big console. Like, honestly, that's kind of what I imagine Valve would put out in a console anyways. But yeah, something with RDNA 3 would be surprising to me, and something with that little RAM would be pretty surprising to me too. But I mean, I guess that could get them in the ballpark of performance you would expect to get out of a little console, even if the end result can do ray tracing, maybe is a bit more powerful on the GPU side and has something like, I don't know, hopefully at least 16 gigs of RAM.
Yeah. I mean, just again, scrolling up here and looking at the specs, my suspicion is that this could be an approximation of what they think you'll get out of Medusa Halo Mini performance or some variant of that, which we'll get to in the next story. Something like that, or they have a custom APU. And what does it have here? Zen 4. So what is Hawk, like Hawk Point 2? What was that one? I think that one was like 2 big cores and like 4 little cores or something. Like there's a chance they could be moving to like a Zen 6, 2 Zen 6, 4 Zen 6C plus 32 CU, product or something like that. Or again, maybe 24 compute units, but they're like, yeah, but 24 RDNA 5 compute units is about equal to 32 RDNA 3. Like, and this is a way for us to test a level of performance without it showing up and being abundantly obvious. This is a Valve console, I guess, besides it saying Fremont. Who knows what that's about, though. So I don't know. That's what I would take this as. If you'll notice, they have 8 gigabytes of RAM there. They have 8 gigabytes in a 7600. My guess is they know they'll have at least 16 gigabytes in the final console. So it's like this is an approximation of the final performance in RAM. And then if we test this and it works really well, we know that the final system, once you boot the game on it, is going to run really well on that. That is what I would take this to mean. But again, I think you always have to wonder like if there's something off, something wrong. But I just think that's important to clarify to everybody. But then go, hey, I'm excited they're working on a console. Don't miss that this could be for a handheld though, and they're approximating handheld performance as well.
Oh, I suppose that's true. I mean, like this could be the evolution of the Steam Deck or something, because a Steam Deck 2 is probably coming at some point, and yeah, maybe this for a increased power at a, I don't know, just wonky specs will approximate the level of performance they have, or again, they're targeting for it.
I think the interesting thing to think about is why use these weird specs? Like, why did Sony take the 5700, not a 5700 XT, and then overclock it to the moon? It's like, well, that's kind of the closest we can get to from a programming perspective, programming to the metal for the same thing. The reason you would use Little Phoenix, which is what this seems to be using for the CPU, even though you don't need an APU if there's a dedicated graphics card, is they're probably trying to simulate 2 big cores and 4 little cores for it to be programmed to. Like that's what they're trying to simulate. And then they're trying to simulate probably some 32 compute unit, or who knows? I mean, someone watching this could probably put in the effort and actually answer this in the comments, to be honest. You could look into how many shader engines are there, and maybe they're approximating that if you program to the metal, and they don't really care how many compute units there are. Like that's the type of thing I think people need to think about. Like again, the 128-bit on the 7600, 128-bit on Little Phoenix, are they approximating a 256-bit bus? I don't know. Like that's the thing I think people should think about. But anyways, let us now move on to the second story today. AMD Zen 6 Medusa Halo and budget RDNA 5 specs leaked. Last news episode, we took a break from our seemingly constant new AMD leaks, but that was nothing but a brief reprieve, it seems, as this time we are back to RDNA 5 GPUs, or really Medusa APUs, or really both.
Everything.
Because they are apparently the same thing. First, let me be honest about the fact that some Medusa information has always seemed a bit confusing, even sometimes contradictory between different leaks that we put out over the past, year. However, we were doing our best to present the most likely interpretations of the info that we got and what it really meant for everything else around it. But now after we've received more info on RDNA 5, after seeing Xbox Magnus, and actually in this video, I leak a render of Xbox Magnus APU. So again, check out that video to see that. And after more information from AT3 and AT4 from a bunch of sources, once we got all of that and put it all together, we think that we can finally make some pretty big conclusions about what the Medusa program is. Because the Medusa program, and I will say this was in a doc, lists not just APUs, but GPUs as being in the same program. You see, just like Magnus and AT2, AT3 and AT4 could be GPU tiles for Medusa. So here, let me break it all down. Our understanding of Medusa Point has not changed much. It is a monolithic 4 big, 4 little, 2 low power core, 8 CU laptop chip. Now, it can add a 12-core CCD for the top-of-the-line laptops that want to also have a dedicated GPU with the most powerful CPU you can get. But the iGPU does seem like a step back, especially if it is released first with RDNA 3.5 graphics and they don't upgrade it to RDNA 4 or 5. I still hear it could be either. Now, if they go to RDNA 4 or 5 with 8 compute units, I still think that could maybe beat Strix Point. But if it's obviously 8 compute units of the same architecture as last gen, yes, that would be quite a step back in GPU performance. But why would they do that? Why would they take such a step back? Well, that is where AT3 and AT4 and AT3 come in. You see, AT4 has a lot more compute units than what is in Strix Point and a lot more potential performance being RDNA 5, as it has 24 RDNA 5 compute units over a 128-bit LP DDR5X memory bus, presumably a lot more cache as well than Strix Point, which helps make up for the fact that it's still just using that memory bus. And yes, it is directly called a dedicated graphics card in some documents, meaning because it uses LPDDR5X, this could be a dedicated low-end graphics card that will most likely in the gaming iterations have 12 or 24 gigabytes of RAM, could have up to 128 gigabytes of RAM. What this would mean is a low-end graphics card, probably that's $300 to $400, or maybe less, I don't know, that gives you around 3060 to 4060 performance, but probably with way better ray tracing than the 4060, and with as much RAM, I don't know, is a 5080, which I think would be really cool for the low end. Now, above that is AT3. This doubles the performance, basically, of AT4 because it goes from 24 to 48 compute units, a 256-bit LPDDR5X memory bus, depending on the socket it's in. If it will use the newest, strongest socket, though, the LPDDR6 socket, because there are more bits per memory module with LPDDR6, it would actually go up to a 384-bit memory bus. This could make it an AI researcher's wet dream, as you could conceivably make a graphics card that will have around RX 9070 performance, but have 512 gigabytes of memory. Although, again, for the gaming iteration, I'd expect 16 gigabytes or maybe up to 32.
Maybe 32.
Yeah. Now, that is arguably the biggest bombshell, that low-end RDNA 5 avoids GPU VRAM supply issues, VRAM capacity issues, by simply using the laptop memory. But by 2027, laptop memory will be as fast as GDDR6. So this honestly makes a ton of sense. And I don't know why we didn't see this coming, nor why Nvidia has tried this yet, while they continue to shove 8 gigabyte graphics cards down our throats. Moving on to the final thing here. I've talked about Medusa Point, and I keep kind of dancing around what exactly I'm saying here. But here's the thing. The specs for AT4, a graphics card, distinctly listed as a dedicated graphics card, and AT3, distinctly listed as a dedicated graphics card, those specs are listed in the Medusa Halo documentation as well, leading me to conclude that this is likely a tile that can be paired with a media die for dedicated, just like AT2 and Magnus for Xbox, or be paired with a CPU tile and become an APU. Now, as for Medusa Halo CPU specs, there is Medusa Halo Mini that is 14 cores total. I don't know the exact makeup, but I would presume, based on what I've seen for the CCXs in design at AMD on some documents, it would be 4 Zen 6, 8 Zen 6C, 2 Zen 6 low power, and then it also lists a 128-bit memory bus. Again, same specs as AT4. And so what you would get is something that honestly is probably about the size of Strix Point, but has 50% more compute units than Strix Point, has more cache than Strix Point, and also has a couple more cores, meaning that, yes, I know Medusa Point has weaker graphics, but apparently this fits in the same socket. So if you wanted a powerful APU in a laptop that would normally have something like Strix, whatever, get this. So that's also very exciting that you'll choose between, do you want the APU with a powerful CPU that adds a dedicated card, or in the same socket, do you just want to get the APU that's as strong as a 4060? As for Medusa Halo, big Medusa Halo, it's confusing actually. They call it Medusa Halo and Medusa Halo Mini. The other one isn't ever called big, so whatever. I don't know, but I'm just going to stick to what they call it. That one lists an IO die with 12 Zen 6 cores and then adds a 12-core CCD, meaning it will be a 3 nanometer IO die, too low power, I think 12 full Zen 6, so I'm not 100% sure if any of them are C cores. And then you add a 12-core CCD for a total of 26 cores. Again, same specs as AT3, so 48 compute units of RDNA 5 and an LPDDR6 memory bus, which with a 384-bit bus can get to, I believe, double the bandwidth of a 9060 XT. So that's quite enough. And so there you go. Again, one thing to clarify here, I am not 100% sure if it's just the same IP block, like if AMD designed an IP block and that's in a dedicated card and they use the exact same one in an APU. But I do have documents saying the Medusa Halo platform puts chiplets into 5 different products, and 2 of them are listed as dedicated cards. Also, if I might say here, if they were not going to use one tile for both, I don't know why the dedicated card would need a 384-bit bus.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, why?
Yeah.
I think they could get by with less. That's only there because it will sometimes be used with a CPU that will also need memory bandwidth, in my opinion. And in fact, let me say this. It wouldn't surprise me if the dedicated version of AT3, the 48 compute unit model, it wouldn't surprise me if they just give that LPDDR5X on desktop, because a 256-bit bus of that will be more than enough for a dedicated card that doesn't also need to provide bandwidth to a CPU. But anyways, all right. I would argue this is maybe the biggest leak out of this channel in years, to be honest. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it kind of just sounds like what we initially discussed as Medusa being like a comparable evolution, or like an evolution of Strix. It almost just sounds like Medusa is its own program and a complete rework of how AMD is going to do their architectures going forward with,
like, handle chiplets and stuff.
Yeah, where I mean, if they're calling all of this Medusa, that to me sounds like they're kind of pairing Radeon and Zen together far more than they have in the past. And, with that amount of modularity, it sounds like they can really get a full, or not full, I guess, because there's still the high-end graphics, but close to a full product stack out for laptop and graphics with, I don't know, what is that, like 5 or 6 different chiplets / IP blocks, I guess, depending on what these end up being.
There's a document,
because there's a bit of
I'll say this, right?
Confusion to me.
I should clarify it for everyone. I've talked to you about this offline, and I think it's safe for me to say this by now. I mean, there's a document that literally says there are 2 like Medusa Halo IO dies on 5 platforms. And then one is AT3, one is AT4, and then there's LPDDR6 Halo, LPDDR5X Halo, and LPDDR5X Halo Mini. And now someone would go, IO dies, does that mean? Well, think of it. An IO die doesn't need, I'm actually probably talking, an IO die means the IO is on there, the memory controller. That doesn't mean the CPU cores are. So, I think that just puts it all, that's right there. Like, I don't technically have something that says this is a chiplet that goes in both, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and just here though, like kind of everything for laptop is covered, and everything up to like mid-range GPUs are also covered. So, I don't know, like including, like you say, like this could be a big asset for AI researchers if they, don't necessarily need the most powerful thing, but you need something that can have a lot of RAM paired with it. That's, I guess I didn't realize how fast LPDDR6 was going to get at this point, which, that's fast enough for
literal GDR6 speeds, like even decent GDR6 speeds.
Yeah, that's probably fast enough, especially across a 384-bit bus for 48 compute units.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. I think that this is incredibly exciting. I mean, this is something that I already put a leak about, a short highlighting part of a conversation on the previous Broken Silicon with Kit Guru, about where he's like, and this did happen. If AMD is going to threaten Nvidia, I mean, before with Ampere, Nvidia bought up all the GDDR6 that AMD needed, and it made it. I mean, I heard AMD was paying $20 a gigabyte instead of $6 during parts of RDNA 2 because Nvidia really screwed them over. If Nvidia tries to do that to AMD again, yeah, look, they can try to screw over AMD in the high end, but in the low end, no, they can't do anything. AMD can keep making these, presumably, I think 450 and like $300 cards, and in infinite volume, they can do whatever they want, and it's also cheaper per gigabyte and more than enough bandwidth. But again, I think this is exciting because I really hope we get a 16 gigabyte, like $250 card, even 300. That is around like I'd guess maybe 250 if they could swing it. Actually, I mean I believe the die, by the way, on AT4, the smallest one, is like 100 millimeters squared. So we're talking 6500 XT die sizes with, I mean, presumably very, very cheap cooling, with RAM that by per gigabyte has gone down significantly since the 6500 XT came out. And it's also a cheaper class of RAM. I mean, they might be paying $2 a gigabyte in bulk for this stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this could drive down low-end GPU prices if all of that is that much cheaper. And I mean, this wasn't like when we first got into PC gaming. I mean, GDDR wasn't a given that it would be on every graphics card. The low end usually had like DDR3 on it a lot of the time.
Yeah, and it was hard because later in the GDDR5 life cycle, it became worse and worse as GDDR5 got faster and faster away from it. But early on, it was kind of fine. And I don't know if we've ever seen laptop RAM be this fast relative to like mainstream GPU RAM. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And again, I think 48 compute units of RDNA 5, guys, an RDNA 5 compute unit is 10% faster than RDNA 4. And this has 50% more cores than the 9060 XT. So you're looking at, like 9070 XT, somewhere around there performance, but with like, I don't know. I mean, on conceivably 5080 ray tracing with 16 gigabytes of RAM, but it's cheap RAM, so it can be $350 or $400. I think the low end is finally going to get some real love next generation. I really do.
And the low end needs it, so
yes,
crossing my fingers.
The final thing that I would say is I don't know. I hate when people complain about this type of thing, but I do feel like the YouTube algorithm buried this video for some reason, and I don't know why. Guys, I think this is the biggest moment in chiplets since like Adored TV leaked that Zen 2 has two 8-core chiplets in an IO. This is the most transformative, especially for gamers, thing we've seen. So I just have to, guys, watch the video, share the video, give it some love, because
this sounds like the biggest sea change in AMD's like design philosophy since Zen, at least, or at a minimum Zen 2.
Yeah, so like, don't let the algorithm bury this one. Share it, like it. If you haven't watched it, check it out. It's very comprehensive and goes through everything from RDNA 5 performance to Zen 6 specs to pictures of the next gen Xbox APU. I mean, guys, come on, share this video, please. Come on, man. This piece of content is brought to you by JLC PCB. JLC PCB supports a wide range of PCB materials, including traditional FR4, aluminum, and copper core boards. But beyond these, JLC also specializes in flexible PCBs, offering enhanced versatility for modern electronics. But that's not all. In addition to classic yellow, black, and white PCB substrates, they now provide transparent PCBs that gives a sleek, futuristic design for electronics that want to ditch bulky enclosures and embrace a more transparent circuit board as their foundation. Truly, whether it is EDA software, PCB layout, manufacturing or assembly, or 3D printing, CNC machining, and mechatronic parts, JLC PCB accelerates global hardware innovation. If you want to get any of these products and support Moore's Law is Dead, check out the link in the description to get easy, affordable, and reliable PCB manufacturing. And you can even get a $10 coupon for a Flex PCB right now. So support Moore's Law is Dead by supporting JLC PCB today. Jeff writes in, presumably before being
peanut butter
sandwich, and says, will AM5 support Halo class APUs? It will support Medusa 1. And that's another thing that just probably flew under the radar from this video. I'm directly confirming Medusa 1, the 8 compute unit model, will fit on AM5. Now, if they use RDNA 3.5 at first, little disappointing. However, I have seen that they at least plan to update it kind of like Phoenix to Hawkpoint with RDNA 4 or 5 eventually. So that means eventually you will get 8 RDNA 5 compute units. That will beat Strix Point, and that will, because it only has 8 compute units, require less bandwidth than Strix Point, which frankly, Strix Point doesn't have remotely enough bandwidth for how many compute units it has and how much cache it has. I just don't think it does. So I think that is Medusa 1 is a good fit for AM5. Now, will
48 compute units? Probably not.
But will mini Medusa fit? Maybe. I think that there's some suggestion it might. It uses a 128-bit bus. The only thing I would say is if you're going to put that on AM5, I would suggest it should be the 20 compute unit models, or even the 16 compute unit models, if it doesn't have a boatload of cache. But again, we don't know how much cache it will have. In the video about this leak, I extrapolated from the documents I have on a 48 compute unit desktop card and said, well, that is 20 compute units. So this probably is, 20 megabytes of L2. So this probably is 10. To put that in perspective, if that's correct, I would say that's probably the minimum it has is 10 megabytes of L2. That's 5 times the L2 cache that's in Strix Point. So I do think that will be enough to not have this get held back by that memory controller. But keep in mind that like even the PS5, the Xbox Series X have more L2 cache than their corresponding desktop APUs because they need it. They don't have infinity cache, so they gave it more L2. You see Strix Point actually has more L2 per compute unit than the desktop cards. And I have to say, it wouldn't surprise me if it has 20 megabytes. And if it has 20 megabytes of L2, that's definitely, that's more L2 cache than the 6500 XT had L3 cache. So that's good. Actually, on that note, Techno writes in, why did they decide to use LPDDR5X on a dedicated graphics card for 2027? At best, that'll give the same bandwidth as a 6500 XT. 6500 XT, no, this will give more by then because there's going to be like around 11 gigabit per second memory. So no, it can actually get more bandwidth than the 6500 XT. Additionally, Techno, and I think this is a huge misconception with the 6500 XT, one that I keep hammering. It was not bandwidth starved. I tested the 8 gigabyte model, and it went from losing to an RX 5080 to decimating an RX 590. Like I'm saying 40% boost in performance there, just going from 4 to 8 gigabytes of RAM, even though it's a 64-bit bus. Even though it's only 16 megabytes of L3, it worked on the 65. Jesus. They just should have given it 8 gigabytes. And so, no, I'm not that worried. This will have more bandwidth than the 6500 XT. We still don't know how much L2 cache. It might end up having a similar amount of L2 or more L2 than the 6500 XT had L3. And it's only meant to be like 40, 60 performance. I think it's fine. I think it'll be fine. Unless we find out it is 5 megabytes of L2, I think it will be fine. But why would they do that? Root Knight writes in, with what you know about the AT4 GPU, how cheap do you estimate we could see AMD get a dedicated GPU to sell for? Are we getting a shot at seeing $500 to $600 gaming pre-builts with a GPU that's not a complete e-waste out of the factory? Well, first of all, you already have mini PCs. Like, again, I'm going to do this fun trick that always makes Dan laugh. And like, there's a new mini PC I'm testing. I actually showed you it, Dan. It has a dial to switch performance modes, and it actually works.
Oh, it's that one?
Yeah. And I booted it up and I was playing Deep Rock. Now, this one only has Hawkpoint, but it's the top Hawkpoint running with a ton of energy. And I was running Deep Rock Galactic at like 4K at medium settings. I was like,
that's pretty good.
So I actually I haven't benchmarked.
Was that with FSR or?
Yes.
Okay.
FSR, but it still looked okay. But for like a 12 compute unit RDNA 3 GPU, or like, I think that's pretty awesome. So, I mean, I hope I'll bring this up later. I don't want to do too much free advertising for Ace Magic here, though I guess I'll mention it to be fair. I can't wait to see what they do with like a Strix Point or a Strix Halo version of it. Like, if you want a sub $600 gaming PC in the future, everybody, there it is. It's right here. This is what you're going to buy. But you mentioned AT4. Perhaps that will have AT4 for $600. So I think,
that's possible.
Yes. I mean, the APU is no bigger than the other APUs we're seeing in many PCs right now. It's just instead of it having extra CPU grunt it doesn't need, it throws most of that die into the GPU for the similar die size.
Yeah, and I guess I just don't know. Maybe this is off base, but like I don't know if there will be some AT4 variant with like disabled the 16, that would be more likely to see it at like $500 than the full 24 gigabyte. I mean, not 24 gigabyte, 24 CU, but
we'll see. I mean, keep in mind, technically that costs the same amount to make. So
True.
long term, it'd probably drift to you could just get that model. Anyways. So yeah, look, mini PCs are the future of budget builds, and they're about to get a hell of a lot better with Medusa APUs. But on top of that, now the dedicated card, I mean, look, guys, as far as I know, this seems to have a 120. I mean, it probably has to add a media die, but like in total, like 120 millimeter square die. So we're looking at about half the die size, right? Of the 90. What is it? With 9060, do we have a die size here? It says, yeah.
This is 199.
Yeah, I thought it'd be around the same. They keep doing exactly around 200. So 200 millimeters squared. This is about 120 millimeters squared. Okay, even on 3 nanometer, that should make the die cost no more. The RAM should cost less than a 9060 XT. Yeah, I think this is a $300 16 gigabyte card, or maybe less, maybe $250 16 gigabyte card. And
crossing my fingers.
It should be, like if they really want it to land well.
Yeah.
But unless it surprises us and RDNA 5 is magic and it can just match the 9060 XT. But like, I think at a minimum, 250, 280 or something is probably what they'll go for. And yeah, I mean, look, they'll do it. I mean, I think they're gonna make everything around there look like a complete joke. And I think even more exciting about this, by the way, Dan, is that it's hitting the level of performance you actually want it to. A big problem we have right now is, yeah, I mean, look, you can get the B580 with 12 gigabytes, but it's not the level of performance you want, really. Like this will, or like if there's a cheaper 12 or 16 gigabyte card, it's like some weird old card.
Yeah.
This will be a modern architecture that will be able to do ray tracing, relatively speaking, compared to its raster performance really well. Again, if it's doing 4060 raster, it's probably doing 4070 ray tracing. Like that's good. That's a $300 card where if you're just in 1080p, you can turn on ray tracing and probably turn on ultra settings. It's not like now where you can get the 7600 XT for about $300, but you're not really going to want to turn on ray tracing. It's going to be compromised. Like you're going to you're going to feel like you have all modern features and even enthusiast features at the resolution this is targeted at, for a price that you usually have to choose one or the other. Do you want it to be reasonable and have enough RAM, or do you want it to have modern features? So I think that's also exciting.
Yeah.
Deadeyes117 writes in and says, in loose ends, you mentioned a few times about RDNA 4 seemingly needing less bandwidth than RDNA 3 for the same level of performance. By what mechanism is that possible? It seems counterintuitive to me that a hardware generation could increase output without also increasing input. Would it be via perhaps something like not needing the same data input multiple times at different stages? Yes, perhaps because it doesn't have to shuffle in and out of cache, better compression. I guess the X3D CPU situation comes to mind as an example where you can do more with less. I mean, look, we have so many examples of in the past. Like, look at Maxwell. Maxwell needed less bandwidth for the same level of performance as Kepler, or more performance. Yeah. And the answer is better design. Right? They've done this many times. I mean, look at RDNA 4. Again, a less cache than the 7900 XTX, a third less bandwidth, and yet better performance overall. I mean, and it's possible on newer nodes. There's newer ways you can design the cache better to be more efficient. And I just think if what I'm seeing in the documents turns out well, RDNA 5 has all of these claims that seem to suggest it's just a home run architecture. And we've seen this many times before, from Kepler to Maxwell is probably the best example.
Yeah, or it'll just fall hard and everybody will be pissed at AMD.
And everyone will get mad at me and say, Tom, you promised that everything would be perfect because you made that thumbnail with RDNA 5 with an explosion.
Why would you do that, Tom?
Because I'm a bad person.
I know. I know.
I was trying to think of an anti-MLID joke, but none are coming to mind right now. We'll get to one later. AI Generated Fish writes in and says, what have you been hearing, if anything, about AMD's use of LPDDR6 RAM? It's allegedly releasing soonish, which would make sense for Medusa Halo. With AMD's history, so I think this is an older reader mail that we're finally getting to on this one. But the way I would choose to answer this is that, yeah, look, I think there's a good chance. I did see someone asking about this in Moore's Law at Discord today, too. Like, is AMD holding Medusa Halo for RDNA 5 and LPDDR6? I mean, I think it was always planned for 2027, but the short answer is kind of, right? I mean, it seems
Yeah.
obvious they're releasing it when the best GPU architecture and the best RAM is available. I will say though, this has the ability, it has a memory bus that can use LPDDR6 or LPDDR5X. It wouldn't surprise me if the first versions of this launch early on like Strix Halo laptops, because I think the only reason you would design it for both, besides I guess giving manufacturers options, is that the existing like HP Strix Halo laptop that I keep mentioning that I have right now, you could drop this into that, and yes, it wouldn't perform as well, but that's a big offering there is too. So it's not like it needs LPDDR6, but I think it's probably not a coincidence that it's launching when all the new tech that it's going to use comes out, right?
Yeah.
Techno writes in, why wouldn't PlayStation use Medusa Halo Mini with AT4 in their PS handheld, especially if optimized well, that could get it consistently down to 15 watts or less? Because Sony likes custom APUs. No, but that is the answer. And I know I talked about them using, look, let's put it this way. My previous PlayStation 6 leak, I think it's obvious AMD wanted them to. I mean, you can see chiplets in like them talking about it on some documents I've seen, and like, ooh, like they were telling Sony, oh, we could just use this when that have all those benefits. But from what I'm seeing in the newest things I've come across, it seems monolithic to me. What I will say is, in terms of like what they could get at 15 watts, what Sony's designed with the PlayStation handheld is going to get you there, and it's a bit better, I'll admit, than the early plans were. So just because Sony is choosing to do what Sony does, which is their own custom APUs, which makes sense because they make hundreds of millions of them, so they don't need to share chiplets to really get any cost savings.
And they seem to get a lot of exactly what they want out of them, so makes sense that Sony would keep doing it.
But what I will say is it's not like they're going to choose to make a custom one that's worse. It's for what they need. It's going to be really, really, really well targeted at that power consumption level, I think. All right. Speaking of APUs, though, let us move on to one that does not use anything custom with story number 3. ROG Xbox Ally X handhelds launch October 16th. Quoting from Microsoft before the write-up, together with Asus, we are launching the ROG Xbox Ally and ROG Xbox Ally X on October 16th. Since unveiling the ROG Xbox Ally handhelds, the community's excitement and anticipation has been nothing short of inspiring. And we're excited to bring you a whole new way to experience the joy of gaming with the people you want, anywhere you want. So yeah, there you go. Microsoft and Asus have finally revealed a launch date for the ROG Xbox Ally handhelds, which will launch on October 16th. The ROG Xbox Ally truly is an ROG first and an Xbox second device, though. And I did see this in a lot of the little videos they put out, like Asus is talking most of the time. It is, well, a Windows handheld, therefore. From the Fox's impressions of a Gamescom demo of the ROG Xbox Ally, I know he did some videos on this, the Xbox full screen mode and other tweaks to Windows present in the device's OS are significant improvements, though, bringing the Windows handheld experience closer to the Steam Deck experience. Still, there are a lot of nagging issues remaining that are yet to be worked out. Like, it seems the ROG Xbox Ally won't launch as a completely polished console just yet, almost like it's in beta, with a mixed state of readiness of the features they've announced, which makes it, well, seem a lot like another Windows PC. The big underreported issue, though, is that the two devices are radically different. The Ally Non-X is an overgrown Steam Deck. It's just, that's right, years after making AMD develop Van Gogh for them, Microsoft is finally using it. In 2025, it is going to be a Zen 2 quad-core, arguably almost a Zen 2C quad-core, if you look at the clocks and what they did with the cache, by the way, with 8 RDNA 2 CUs. That's hardly enough to run really any modern Xbox games. Meanwhile, the Ally X uses Strix Point with 3 Zen 5 cores and 5 Zen 5C cores for a total of 8 cores and 16 compute units of RDNA 3.5. Not RDNA 4, not RDNA 5. And that's a problem. Microsoft is also introducing badges to mark which games work with controller, but also how games perform. And a game running 60 FPS on Ally X might be a complete slideshow on the Non-X. Again, I want to say this. RDNA 3.5, I think, is like 20% better per compute unit than RDNA 3. And RDNA 3 is 10% better than RDNA 2. I mean, this thing is like 3 times the performance. Any 60 FPS game rated for the Ally X, yeah, Sideshow 20 FPS in Windows on the non-X.
Yeah. I mean, it really, these don't feel like the same thing to me, like you said in the write-up, and I don't know. I guess I don't know how Microsoft came to this. It really, to me, at this point, feels like Microsoft just said, "Hey, want to slap our name on your thing that you guys are releasing, anyways." I mean, maybe that's just rampantly wrong speculation for me, but I don't know. These aren't the same console.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is I do know for a fact from talking to people behind the scenes that there was a truly custom APU, apparently that used ARM, by the way,
Okay.
for an Xbox handheld that was going to have direct backwards compatibility. By the way, let me jump in here again and say X had community notes that claimed I was wrong. The Ally handhelds wouldn't have backwards compatibility. Suck it, nerds. It doesn't. I was right. You were wrong. And anyone, I think, by the way, who thought for 5 seconds would have gone, I don't know how 8 compute units of RDNA 2 is going to have backwards compatibility to 20 compute units of RDNA 2 in the Series S. That should have been obvious. But again, These are not Xboxes. These are ROG consoles. They were working on an Xbox console, again, with an ARM CPU. I think what happened is they were working on all these features in Windows to make it efficient. They shelved the handheld they were actually working on because they don't really care about Xbox anymore. And then they paid Asus some money to like work with them on turning their next ROG handheld into what will be branded as Xbox as a way to do beta testing for their new gaming OS version of Windows. Also, it feels very Surface-like, where I remember reading that Microsoft was tired of really crappy Windows tablets launching like a decade ago, and that's where the Surface line came. Is they're like, we will prove you can do it well. Good Lord. And that's what this is as well, is they're tired of Windows handhelds losing market share to Steam. Again, Microsoft has a massive market share issue right now where they are losing Windows users. And so I think that's what they did. They shelved their own handheld they were working on. They worked with Asus, but they still want to use it as a way to develop this handheld OS thing that will also optimize Windows gaming, because they know they're getting beaten by SteamOS. Before you talk, though, Dan, we just finished the write-up here. There are pricing rumors. Microsoft has refused to comment on pricing, citing macroeconomic impact to pricing is likely to have an effect. Okay. But Blue Sky leaker Bill claimed that it is $899.99 for the Ally X and $549.99 for the Ally Non-X. Another leaker, Wario64, found the handhelds listed at those prices on Best Buy's back end hours later. If true, this makes the Ally X the most expensive handheld, and the Ally Non-X would still cost more than a bloody Steam Deck OLED. So I don't know. It seems while Sony is testing 8 high pricing with the PS5 Pro, Xbox is going to try that out now with ROG devices. Yeah. And by the way, let me say that too. I just put out a short about PlayStation 6 pricing. And I want to be clear about what I said, everybody. I said it will cost less than the PS5 Pro is my belief. And that if they wanted to, they could have the same price as the PS5, but not give you a disc drive. Let's be very clear about that. If the base PS5 is $700 when the PS6 is announced, I think the base PS6 will be $700 for that disc drive. Right now it's $550 though. So let's just be very clear that as tariffs make things worse, I'm adjusting what I think the PS6 price will be from like $499 to $549 to $600 potentially. But we don't need to regurgitate all of that. Dan, what do you think?
I mean, so at the end of the day, I don't think this really brings that much new to the table, especially at those prices. This is kind of just a rehashing of things that already exist for, I think, worse pricing, and depending on what you're looking at. I mean, I don't know. This is kind of a fart of a thing.
If it is at those prices.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess if Microsoft is putting a lot of work into optimizing it, maybe that'll make Windows handhelds in the future operate better, or maybe this will be like a sneak peek into that. But I don't know. That's about the most compelling case I feel like I've got for this, especially the non-X with, I don't know, years old specs at this point.
It's funny because I remember we were called haters when it was first announced by Xbox people, not by PC people. And it's because what we said before we knew the release date, before we had these pricing rumors, is I said at least I do not think it will be cheap. I expect it to cost at least $700, probably $800 or more. And because of that, I think it is a slap in the face to Xbox gamers because it does not play their console games. It doesn't, by the way. It doesn't. They said it in the video. But if you're a PC gamer, this is clearly an initiative to make Windows work better for PC gamers. And if you want to play PC games, it's another option for playing PC games. I'll buy an inexpensive one. And it's funny that we have all of this new official information, and it seems like our initial take was pretty correct, Dan. It's expensive. It's a slap in the face to Xbox fans. It's great for PC gaming.
Potentially great for PC gaming. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and that the initiative itself should make Windows more efficient.
Sure.
That excites me. But yeah, I don't know that I have that much else to say about it, except that, again, where I'm not worried about what Sony's capable of doing with pricing on the PS6 and the PS6 handheld. I know if they really wanted to, they could go to like $400 for the handheld, probably $450 to match the Nintendo one. But $450 for the handheld, $550 for the home console. I know they could do that. And by the way, that's not at a loss, everybody. I think that's them making a profit. My concern is that we've seen Xbox move the Series X up to PlayStation 5 Pro pricing, which is a joke, where this handheld is rumored to cost more than everything. I mean, I want to know what that Strix Halo handheld is going to cost. If that thing's like $1,200 and it's got over double the compute units of the Xbox one, it's just, again, might as well just get Strix Halo, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
My concern is that we'll see like Xbox Magnus announced for $1,000, Xbox handheld for $900, and then Sony's going to be sitting there, with their like little chart, like with $450 and $550 on it, and go, oh,
$650,
it's like $550, $750. Like that's what I'm worried about. But if they do that, guys, it sucks. Blame tariffs and blame the fact that Xbox has fucking put the Series X above $700 for months before Sony raised PS5 Pro prices. That's who's raising console prices right now. And I just hope they don't completely follow it. There's no doubt they'll follow it to a degree because it would be financially irresponsible for them. But hopefully it's like AMD versus Nvidia, where the 5070 Ti is $750 and then the 9070 XT is like $600. And so if like Magnus is $800, hopefully even not $1,000, Sony doesn't go to like $750, they go to like $650 or $600 because they can if they want to. But man, when I see rumors of a $900 Xbox handheld, I do worry about what Sony will charge for their handheld.
It doesn't bode well.
Because I'll say this before I officially put all the information in a week. It's stronger, by the way. Just the PlayStation handheld is stronger than this handheld. And if they charge $900 for this, I'm really worried about what Sony will charge.
Yeah.
Depressing. More wins for gamers from Team Xbox. AI generated Fish writes in and says, if Xbox moves to basically Windows-based interfaces, will that mean the end of console exclusives? Will I finally be able to stop emulating PS3 football? No, because no. I mean, I think you're going to keep having to do that because, again, I have PlayStation documents. I've already leaked this. Nowhere does it say PS3 backwards compatibility. So I think you're going to be running PS3 emulators for a while, but hopefully I'm wrong, and I say for a while because, I think they will remaster like Killzone 2 with ray tracing added for PS6. I don't think they're going to remaster NCAA football and NHL hockey.
Maybe they will because that's NCAA football, Tom. I think that's coming back. Or it already came back. So maybe we'll get a rehash of the PS3 version of it for some reason.
All right. Let's see here. Oh, well, yeah. Speaking of prices that gamers don't like, let us move on to story number 4. Sony finally raises PS5 pricing. All right, here we go. Quoting from Sony, similar to many global businesses, we continue to navigate a challenging economic environment. As a result, we've made the difficult decision. So much difficulty in it. I'm sure it breaks their hearts. To increase the recommended retail price for the PS5 console in the US starting on August 21st. The updated recommended retail price for the PS5 consoles in the US are as follows: $550 for the PS5 digital. Oh no, yeah, $550. That confused me when I read it originally too. It's in a weird order in my opinion. $550 for the PS5 digital. We'll try again. Gerard, leave it in.
Try.
Leave it in. Leave it in. The PS5 will be $550. That is the version that comes with a disc drive. The PS5 digital edition will be $500, and the PS5 Pro will be $750. The recommended retail prices for PlayStation 5 accessories will remain unchanged, and we have no other price changes to announce for additional markets, which they've already raised those recently. After already raising PS5 prices in other markets, Sony has been forced to increase MSRPs in the US as well. Yes, forced to. We know it is easy to bash the evil, which I already did, money-hungry corporations, but in this case, look, Sony is not entirely to blame here. Neither is really Microsoft for some of the price increases they did. I do blame them if the handout is $900, though. Tariffs and U.S. trade policy are: Microsoft chose to rip the Band-Aid off immediately and drastically, probably because they're not even producing the Xbox anymore. Sony held off on increasing the price tag of consoles, but ultimately they have had to. And we did see this coming and warned you they would do it eventually, multiple times, by the way. Meanwhile, the U.S. government's own statistics continue to show next to no growth in manufacturing jobs, or, like in June, in fact, a decrease in U.S. manufacturing jobs. So we can only hope that things don't get worse. But to be honest, they probably will get worse. We'll probably continue to have to pay more for the products we want to buy. Well, these tariffs will actually kill U.S. manufacturing. Damn, I don't know if there's to say about this. We kind of already talked about it, but
yeah, we've talked tariffs to death, I feel like. But
oh yeah, that side I have nothing else to say.
Yeah, this sucks. I don't know. It's not the worst thing in the world, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. $50 more for a $500 purchase isn't everything, but still sucks. And if you could have gotten the PS5 earlier, I guess you should have. Like, the age of waiting to buy hardware to save money seems to be over.
Again, hopefully it'll come back. This is something that I bring up for both Xbox Magnus and especially for the PS6 that I know directly in documents says it's trying to keep costs lower. It's 2027. So who knows? By then, maybe there will be reductions in tariffs. Maybe things will be better. And maybe supply chains, even with some tariffs, will be rerouted in a way to go around them better. Hopefully so. I guess, I was about to say something. I don't know if it's true. I was about to say, let's just thank God the PS6 is launching in 27 and not in 2025. But actually, I don't say that. I don't know if that's actually going to be a good thing. All I can say is we can hope that by then things will have happened at lower prices and not increase them further.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I don't know. I made fun of Sony in the beginning of the write-up because it's like, they're not really to blame for raising prices. We've been saying this was going to happen due to tariffs for a while, but the way that they write it, where they're like, oh, it pains us. I mean, just say it. We're raising prices because prices have gone up and we don't care. Yeah. It doesn't mean they're evil, but feel pain doing it. I don't think
it hurts.
It just so much. Feels so bad.
We hate making. Well, I guess they're probably not really making more money, but we hate making more money.
Carbon Cry writes in and says, Tom, you keep acting as if the PS6 handheld is something new and great. Do not forget that the PS5 already has a portable gaming device, and I haven't sent you it, but it is a picture of a PS5 plugged in on a subway train in Europe, I presume, with a monitor in front of it. So, yes. Or I guess you could bring one of those giant batteries that I have and probably power some of these consoles. And, yeah.
I mean, it is pretty quick to plug in a modern console, so they are kind of all mobile.
That's true. Yeah, that's right.
There's only like two things to plug in at this point, so who cares?
Yeah, nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, presumably you could have the PlayStation Portal. You could just plug in to an outlet on a train and then just hold the tablet wirelessly if you wanted to be peak nerd.
The PlayStation Portal, the coolest device in existence.
Every time I talk to Colin Moriarty, he raves about it. So it's it's not for me, but it has sold out and people like it. I like the low latency, so
And of course, Colin Moriarty likes the Portal. It's
He
like
would.
he doesn't care about latency, and he's the biggest Sony nerd of all time. Of course, he loves the Portal.
He would love the Portal. The person who said, and Colin, this is with love. He's made fun of himself. The person who wrote the article like a month before it came out, the PlayStation Vita is set to succeed. I would not surprise me. He likes the PlayStation Portal. And again, Colin, this is with love. I thought the Vita was cool as well, but yeah. But yes, that would not be a surprise. That is a very fair point. Just like it is also a fair point to say that we have sponsors that we need to get to. This podcast is brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com. Right now, you can get 3% off all of their games on their website right now. And they have a lot of the most recent games. They have Age of Empires 4, they have Black Myth Wukong, and they often have them for well below MSRP. And if you use offer code DIESHRINK, you can get 3% off. So again, support Moore's Law is Dead by supporting a sponsor of this channel for many years. CDkeyoffer.com. Get games for 3% off. Already their cheaper price there. Link is in the description. All right, Dan. Let us now move on to something that has no way for me to do a good transition with story number 5. Nvidia's CPU overhead is hitting a breaking point with Battlefield 6, quoting from Hardware Unboxed before the editorialization. The GeForce overhead issue isn't a major problem in Battlefield 6 compared to other games. Certainly not like what we've seen in some games where performance can fall down to the tune of 20 to 30%. However, this is a game that needs all the CPU performance you can get it, and so it is fairly pronounced in that way, although it is the worst case 10%. So not ideal, but we did see quite a big difference between Radeon and GeForce GPUs and how they stack up depending on the map that we were testing on. For example, testing on the Liberation Peak map, we generally saw the GeForce GPUs come out on top. Yes, that was one of the easier CPU ones to run. Well, what we think are the most demanding maps, such as Siege of Cairo and Empire State, especially Empire State, by the way. I checked that one, got drops to 75 frames per second on PS5 Pro. That's how performance much more even when not CPU limited between the 5080 and the 9070 XT. So again, even though it might be a 10% shift or something, it's not a good look for Nvidia to have the 9070 XT beating the 5080 that costs often twice as much. Even testing with a Ryzen 5 7600, which is a fairly popular lower end gaming CPU, we were unable to identify CPU bottlenecking that was abnormal. It is just simply the case that NVIDIA's graphics cards require more CPU to get the same level of performance of an equivalent GPU from AMD. And yeah, I saw with the 5600, it made it quite a bit worse, though, with Zen 3. But yeah, anyways, Battlefield is a more CPU demanding game than most games, but it does make the best of what it can do for the future. The concern here, though, is what will happen with future games, especially with GTA 6, which is rumored to use CPU-demanding features like dynamic, responsive animation systems. Even worse, generally, driver overhead is worse the bigger the GPU is with NVIDIA, it seems. Well, NVIDIA's drivers allow the RTX competitor in AT0, maybe called the RPX 6090, or I guess they call it 1090. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they'll go to 6000 series as well. That would really annoy me if they do that, by the way. Outperform the RDNA 5 flagship, be outperformed by the RDNA 5 flagship. And yeah, and before I continue this conversation, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we did an entire die shrink about Battlefield 6 performance testing and NVIDIA CPU overhead issues. But I did want to bring it here because I do think this is a note this is a very big deal, that we see at least 10% swings with modern CPUs. By modern, I mean Zen 4, Zen 5 in Battlefield 6. And that's enough to have a 9070 XT swing above a 5080 in some scenarios. What happens when we have even more CPU demanding games with even stronger GPUs? What happens when AMD has graphics cards with hundreds of compute units against NVIDIA with hundreds of SMs in the 6090? I think this is something to worry, because if AMD launches a graphics card that matches the 6090 evenly, but then there's a 20% boost in a lot of games because NVIDIA's driver overhead is that bad, I think AMD could just have a clear-cut win next generation. And NVIDIA needs to solve the CPU overhead issue by the 6000 series, or AMD might win by default with RDNA 5.
Yeah, I mean, Nvidia needs to do this thing where they stop. I mean, needs to stop doing this thing where they cut corners, like and have this CPU overhead issue that is just because they, I, I mean, I guess wanted to save a little bit of silicon to like juice their numbers a little bit, which eventually was going to become an issue with certain games. Like, I don't know what else to really say about it other than, yeah, this is just an issue baked into NVIDIA's design philosophy that I don't really know if there's any way to fix it this generation. And I hope whatever comes out after Blackwell fixes it.
Yeah. But see, I don't have that much else to add about it. You know, again, Gerard will put it on screen. We did a full die shrink going through the performance we saw between PlayStation 5 Pro, Strix Halo laptop, 9070 XT, your 79. No, you didn't. You just tried the PS5 Pro.
Yeah,
and then my
unfortunately.
RTX 4090. So we tried it Nvidia, APUs, AMD, GPUs, consoles. Overall runs very, very well, but definitely.
And if there is another beta weekend ever, I will make sure to boot it up on my 7900 XTX. Just did not have the time to.
I mean, if there is, I'll try it out on this Hawkpoint system next week.
Yeah.
I would honestly love to see how it runs. But let me throw this in. Fred Borger writes in and says, unrelated to most things, but I did want to chime in and say that playing Battlefield 6 at high settings in 1440p, I had FSR quality on. I was getting over 120 frames per second, probably more around 180. Very good running game, and it looks fantastic and plays fantastic. Yeah, look, on the peak map, the one that they said doesn't require as much CPU, I mean, I can say that I was hitting, I sent you a video of it. My 9070 XT was hitting like 3.4 gigahertz to 3.5 at times, which is kind of crazy actually. And it was getting 200 frames per second in 4K. And then, of course, I had FSR with dynamic resolution on, but it looked very sharp. And then with the RTX 4090, look, it looked a little sharper, but it was capped at like 144. And I was like, ooh, I have a 200 hertz display. Honestly, I might choose the 9070 XT over a 4090 for this game because it looks sharp enough. And I just think that's a huge problem. It really is a huge problem for NVIDIA. And it's not one that's going to go away. But before I get into some weird cadence where I basically just re-say everything I've already said, let us now move on to story number 6. So I guess I'll say a few key things and then let you take it away because I know you did a lot more research into the story. But, Gamers Nexus did an NVIDIA GPU smuggling video where they went to multiple countries, looked at the supply chains, looked at how people smuggle GPUs into China and what they do. I saw him looking at GPUs where they were taking dies off of one PCB, putting it on another one. I remember seeing that part of it. I kind of mostly skimmed through the video. I know you watched the whole thing, or at least most of it. The most of what I will add is, this is my point, everybody, that I've been making forever. When you see NVIDIA GPU shipment market share, and then like some games, you'll see like AMD at like 20 to 30% of the market, like in that one game, or like if a dev asks like what percent of their users are Radeon versus NVIDIA, and it seems like it's usually around 15 to 20%. But then you look at Steam hardware and it's like, well, why does it say NVIDIA has so many? Or when you look at John Petty Research, why does it say they ship so many? A lot of these cards being shipped are not going to gamers. They're going to AI, and they are being smuggled into China, and we just don't really know what the makeup of market share is for graphics cards, and that's why I continue to estimate 15 to 25%. And also, I think it's rightfully proves that this is a joke. These shipment and like trade barriers in place for NVIDIA going to China, because they are like, every person in Singapore doesn't own 105090s. That's where they're smuggling them in. And so I think this further proves that, and I applaud Steve at Gamers Nexus for doing that. Meanwhile, I will just also throw out there that this video was pulled because Bloomberg was mad. They used some part of a clip or something, which is ridiculous. Although, who knows what really caused it. There are some people that think that NVIDIA may have looked for a way to get it pulled. Because I will say NVIDIA does have people that look for ways to do this sort of stuff. And they may have found one clip, contacted Bloomberg and said, can you please? I don't know. But that's a conspiracy theory. But who knows? Maybe that is what they did. I will say I'll also applaud Steve for not being afraid to attack Nvidia, and in a real way, not just like, oh, Nvidia charged too much for an 8 GB card, which we've beaten to death. Like, this is how Nvidia is getting around sanctions and trade policy, and it's ridiculous that major companies basically get to do whatever they want, whereas a bunch of trade barriers are hurting smaller companies that don't have the clout of Nvidia to just kind of shrug it off. But I don't know. That's my what did you see in the video? How would you summarize the video? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, the thing is, it's a very long video, so
Yes.
My main takeaways from it were that it is definitely to some effect, or to some extent, these trade policies that they're putting in place do to some extent hamper efforts.
And before Trump was president, by the way, let us jump in and say there were plenty under Biden. So this is not like a Trump bashing.
This isn't just
here,
Trump.
No.
Although I don't fully understand, and I wish I could take more time to sit down and fully understand how they've changed the policy, because there's a whole section of the video about how the policy of how they've decided to decide what should and shouldn't be banned is kind of stupid and arbitrary, which not a surprise. It's the government.
Well, I've thought
it's the government writing policy. What a surprise.
Yeah.
But my main takeaway was that it definitely creates a barrier to barrier that hampers some efforts from China to like build full data centers that use AI. But it's very porous. A lot. If you want to get a 5090 in China, you can get a 5090.
Yes.
There are some dealers that are like, you guys want a 5090? It might take a bit, but I can get you a bunch of 5090s if you want. And the main way they seem to be doing this is, I would say kind of like straw purchases, like similar to how they work in like how guns end up in Chicago, they get purchased in Indiana and
Gary,
Indiana,
and then brought over the border.
Yeah, so that seems to be a big way. And then the other way is quote unquote spillage, I guess, in facilities, because a lot of these GPUs are manufactured or partially manufactured in China. And they just have a QC issue where NVLink happens to not work on a bunch of 5090s or 4090s, and they just find their way into Chinese universities. Like a professor they talked to was like, yeah, this NVLink doesn't work on this one, so we have it. And like the professor tongue-in-cheek said, yeah, I'm sure NVIDIA is aware of these QC issues that are happening in factories. So, I mean, I would say that's the main takeaway for me is, to some extent, maybe you could say it does work a little bit. It makes it harder for you to get a big data center, but
sure,
people can still buy what they want. And, people at like universities are still mostly able to get what they want. And for them, it's mostly a matter of having enough RAM. So like the stuff that's getting to them anyways mostly works. Although if you can get a 5090 or a 4090 out of campus, that's nice to have. And then I'm trying to think of other than that. I mean, I think that's the big takeaway. There was, I guess, the thing that was funny to me, and they hammered this home a lot in the documentary, was to some extent, like they discussed it as a ban, but in China, it's just, there's no real ban. It's, a ban of entry. There's not a ban of sales. So a lot of people are like vaguely aware of this idea that like these GPUs aren't supposed to be sold to China, but once they're in China, there's nothing illegal about buying them. So like a lot of people were more open to discussing it than you would think, because like, I mean, I'm not doing anything illegal here in China, even if Nvidia doesn't like that I'm buying this. And then I would say the connection to Nvidia that they make in the video is, and probably to Nvidia's, intentionally on Nvidia's part, vague, because like, well, there's probably not going to be a super strong line, but it's just like Nvidia kind of just probably allows this to happen, and there's not that much of a need for them to do it all themselves, because we're going to have these GPUs get manufactured and they're going to find their way into China, and then we're just going to look the other way when they make their way into China. And there just happens to be a bunch of GPUs getting in through Singapore or Hong Kong or Macau. And no, I don't think they mentioned Macau and Taiwan to some extent.
Yeah, I've always heard Hong Kong and Singapore are huge ones.
Oh, yes, and Singapore.
And a few things here. Number one, I actually want to plug Broken Silicon 113 from years ago, where I had on Ted from Silver Knight PCs, who has a lot of experience with people who smuggle GPUs all over the world. We'll leave it at that, a little bit of like where that comes from, but he does know directly about how this happens and where it is. If you want more of that type of content, he spills the beans on like deals he's seen, how they do the deals. It's very interesting. Now, I also want to add on to the thing you laughing about in China, like not being aware. Well, some of them are, but they will, because they will sell RTX 4090s on eBay from China. And in the title, it always says bought pre-ban. How? What proof do you have? Like what? And they just, you put that there, and they're even allowed to sell it from China back to us without, something markup on it. So this is a complete joke, really.
Oh yeah, that was interesting too. Like some of these like distributors were still selling their stuff outside of China because they were able to get it into China cheap enough to still be able to sell it at like a profit. And I think he brought up, I believe one of them, he said like a lot of them were going to like Rwanda or something.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I was told. I don't remember if it's in that podcast with Ted or not, but like about these deals where like even in like Eastern Bloc countries, I'm not talking about like China, Russia. I'm talking about like, like Albania or, around like the Caucasus and like Georgia and stuff, like where they don't get a lot of GPU shipments. There's people that will just buy up 1650s and ship them around the mountains there and bring them to like PC shops or something. But yeah, so like that's the type of thing as well, where it's like, is that really profitable? But it's like, it is in this part of the world. But it's sad that it is with China, because when I remember Ted talking about this, these are countries a lot of times where it's legal. They just don't really have an easy way. Like it's literally still profitable in China to stockpile them in China and sell them from China. Even like you'd think at least they'd open up a warehouse in Vietnam or something to do it, but they don't even need to do that, do they? So yeah, I don't know. I think this is I want more of this, because I'm just so sick of seeing this legislation that affects us, affects how easy it is for us gamers to get graphics cards at a reasonable price. And I mean, look, it's not doing jack shit to stopping China from getting graphics cards. The argument would be, well, it still is enough of a friction that if there's two startups, the American one can get running a few months quicker. Maybe. Would you say that based on this, that's probably true? Or would you dispute if it even stops that?
My money would be, I would guess it would slow it, at a minimum, slow it down to an extent. But if somebody disagrees with me, tell me in the comments.
Yeah, but how much it slows it down, right? Is
the real
question.
I mean, it might only be on the scale of months or something.
Which I guess you could argue,
maybe that's the desired effect. Is it makes China 15% worse at being able to utilize AI than the US, which is enough for us to keep winning the arms race.
I guess that's maybe the argument.
Maybe that's the goal.
But I guess I would like to see a lot less politicians grandstanding for a bill and being like, this stops China. It doesn't. You know it doesn't. And Nvidia knows it doesn't. So
maybe the politicians don't know it doesn't, because they're all whatever.
Well, they're all octogenarians. Probably not. Yeah, probably not, actually. It's all computers. All right, let us move on then to the wrap up here. Oh, speaking of it's all computers and that accent, the U.S. is taking a 10% stake in Intel. How much have you read about this, Dan? Like, I'm wondering if you have a take on this.
I don't have too much of one yet, as I'm worried about a hostile takeover of Intel by the U.S. government, but I don't know, 10% take, I guess. I guess that's what they want to try to make the U.S. competitive against Taiwan.
Yeah, but so I was actually talking to some people about this the other day. I mean, I'll just say our mom and dad wanted to know what I thought. And what I told them was short term, a 10% stake in Intel by the US government might fix some time bomb of running out of cash. I'd have
Sure.
to presume that was a factor here, or I don't know really why they would want this. So on the surface, there's that, and you can say that helps Intel and blah 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 blah. What I explained to them though is if you it's like, what's your goal? Is your goal to bail out Intel because it's a big company? If that's what you're doing, then I guess that's what you're doing, and we can get into an argument about if that's right. I think that government bailouts are often not worth it, not good. A little bit of a libertarian stint in me on that one. But, if your argument, though, is that this is for the United States and security, I would call bullshit. I'll just say it. Number one, Intel's capacity is not being fully utilized, not even by themselves. They are using TSMC. And so propping up more existing capacity is the wrong way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
What they should do is try to force TSMC to build more cutting edge capacity in the US, or provide incentives where, like, my pie in the sky idea would be the US government comes in and says, Intel, we're going to buy 10% stake in you, but you have to spin off half your foundries. And these foundries are now going to be a joint TSMC operation where they're going to share technology here, and we're going to provide a 10% rebate to companies on what they spend at that foundry, so that we have people make their stuff in the US. And I'm not even saying if that would be the right thing to do. I'd have to think about it more. But if your goal is to make US security better, Intel themselves is using TSMC. TSMC can make foundries anywhere. Just because they're headquartered in Taiwan doesn't mean they need to have all their foundries in Taiwan. And the way to do that is like breaking up Intel into the part that we need for national security, which is not the CPU side, by the way. We have AMD, we have Apple, we have all of these companies making CPUs that are not Intel. It is not a national security issue if Intel doesn't make CPUs. You can buy them from AMD. If it's the manufacturing side, which should be broken off and upgraded with TSMC, because even Intel isn't using their own foundries.
Mm-hmm.
And so my worry would be that they just lit billions of dollars on fire and it does nothing really.
Yeah, that seems to be a lot of what we're doing with Intel right now. So,
well, with a lot of things, but so I don't know. I don't really have. I mean, I guess I'm sure I'll get a bunch of angry comments or comments saying that I'm right. A lot of fiery comments either way about my initial take. But me and Carbon Cry went back and forth, and if this should have been a main story, but our conclusion was it's kind of still evolving. So let's wait to see where this goes before we make it a main story. But my short-term thoughts are, look, get 10% boost to Intel financials. AMD is light years ahead of them now. They're going to need more than that. So hopefully this doesn't turn into snowballing bailouts for something that you should just be, again, spending money on TSMC, AMD, Nvidia, and Apple scaling up in the US, which are succeeding companies, is what I would argue. And another, I guess, the final thing I would say, and this is again where it becomes a little political, becomes a bit of a rant, but like, more competition is good. And I do think there's an issue right now in the world where we keep bailing out bigger corporations, which doesn't allow smaller corporations to emerge and make a better product. And if that keeps happening, that is why we keep having incumbents with shitty software, shitty reliability, increasingly worse stuff, is because you do need to, maybe the banks needed a bailout. I don't know. I don't want to get into an argument over that right now, but like, companies should be allowed to fail. And
I mean, especially if a company just can't meet its design goals ever.
Well, and if that company is already replaced by Apple and AMD. And I'm not saying I want Intel to go out of business. I want them to succeed, but they need to succeed because they had to. AMD had to succeed with Zen, and what did they become? One of the best companies on earth. If Intel just gets welfare money, they're not going to get to a place where they're as good as AMD, because they won't need to get that well. They'll become just part of a larger welfare state.
Yeah, what if instead of Zen, we just got, I don't know, what's
Wrecking
another piece of
ball
construction equipment?
Yeah. Like wrecking ball or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of what is that what pile driver is or excavator? I don't know.
Excavator, pile driver, crane. Would they have gotten to crane eventually?
Crane, cargo truck, or whatever the mining truck,
dump truck,
dump truck. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, that's the thing. Is it's like, and I'm not saying the government shouldn't get involved with Intel Foundries. It's just a blank 10% stake in the company. I'm like, it just reminds me a little of the CHIPS Act. They're like, let's make tons of silicon manufacturing. Never mind the fact that the companies that supply capacitors and PCBs and like all this other stuff is actually what's missing in the US. We actually have plenty of silicon capacity. I'm worrying this is just another shortcut to thinking they're propping it up, but they're not spending money on the right things. Well, speaking of using Intel capacity, though, there's rumors that Nintendo could use them, and this is hilarious because this was like days after I said to Leo at Kit Guru, and he's like, what could you realistically use Intel capacity for where there wouldn't be a conflict of interest? And I was like, Nintendo APUs. Like, so I think that makes sense to me. Use it like Intel capacity to make Nintendo to Switch 2s in the US. Who knows? Maybe there will be a 18A version or something of the PlayStation 6 made in the US. That's sort of a thing if it doesn't get too expensive and it keeps capacity in the United States. That sort of stuff is cool. But again, that's not the design side that they're bailing out. Another thing here, this one I actually was pretty excited about. I have to say,
because you hate consumers.
Because I hate consumers. But it says that PlayStation 4 support may be ending in 2026. Oh, look at that. A year before the PS6 that I said
only 13 years after the PS4 came out too.
Which is, I believe, when they killed off PS3.
Oh.
But again, your PS4 games will run on the PS5 and the PS6. Ending official support for the PS4 a year before the PS6 come out. Again, this goes hand in hand with what I've been saying about the PS6. This seems like it is built to make PS4 people upgrade.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is exciting because, again, the joke you made about your anti-consumer. Look, I ranted about this with Colin Moriarty, bringing him up again when he was on Broken Silicon and on his own podcast, Sacred Symbols Plus. But it's like, we're not going to get true PS5 games, and the PS4 isn't being supported by the same game. That's why Death Stranding 2, Battlefield 6 runs at high refresh rates with incredible physics on the cons on a Series S. That's why Death Stranding 2 looks like a PS6 game. That's why GTA 6 will look like a PS6 game. It is because they didn't have to support the previous generation. And the sooner Sony kills PS4 support, the better in my eyes. Guys, it has been over a decade. The only excuse you can make is the PS5 is more expensive. Hopefully the PS6 is reasonably priced, including the PS6S, and there will be no more excuses.
Yeah.
But again, I think this is evidence. This is what Sony's thinking. So this one's interesting. FSR goes open source by accident. I asked about this one, and it seems like I think I saw Kepler on Twitter too say that he asked asked AMD what happened, and AMD said they accidentally posted it on like a GitHub and then deleted it. I don't have much to say about it, except that they would plan to do this eventually, so it's probably not a big deal to them.
Yeah.
Except that supposedly it does show parts of it that are clearly built for RDNA 2 and 3 or something. And so if they never bring it to that, clearly they think they can.
Yeah.
For FSR 4. So again, more evidence FSR 4 should be coming to everything, including maybe a Series S and a Steam Deck within a year. This was interesting. Tiny Corpse, I believe this is an AI company that was ranting about how much AMD's AI stuff sucks software-wise. Now tweeted that it's as good as Nvidia or close. So again, that's a huge deal there. I also saw reports on this that this is important to realize that it's not like gamer mindshare where like AMD catches up to Nvidia on software and then it takes a while for everyone to realize it. In AI, people want the most now. So if they see AMD software is as good as Nvidia, they will just immediately buy all AMD. They don't care. They're not fanboys.
Yeah.
They can't afford to be fanboys like some people can. And finally here, this one's fun, isn't it, Dan? There are now AMD 9070 XTs that use not NVIDIA, but the NVIDIA associated with NVIDIA 16 pins, and some of them have failed.
Seems like a bad design.
Yeah, that's a bad look.
Yeah, that's really not good.
All right. Jensen's AI Wang writes in and says, "Hi, Tom and Dan. I just wanted to share my rare appreciation for FrameGen. I've started turning it on and using it almost always since I got my 5K, 2K, 125 hertz OLED monitor and an RTX 4090. It eliminates flicker and keeps FPS within VRR ranges more effectively than turning down settings, and the artifacting and latency seem minimal for my setup. By the way, it ran terrible on Battlefield 6 for me with the 4090, and I think it's because it needed more CPU to do it. However, I'm still skeptical of the value of multi-frame gen since I don't feel I'm likely missing anything without going to 500 frames per second. I'm usually around 60 to 90 anyways without frame gen in new games and using DLSS quality mode. As in reviewers have said, it's a solution for rich people problems. So yeah, I don't know much to say about that. It's a chance for me to point out something I haven't said yet, which is I tried frame gen with the 4090 in Battlefield 6 and it lowered my frame rate because
that's awesome.
It was already CPU bottlenecked. Again, I have Zen 4X 3D, so
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm guessing you haven't tried frame gen recently at all.
No, not really.
No, but we're not frame gen people.
Maybe I should play around with it more sometime.
You should. We should try it every now and then to see if it's gotten better, if we would like it or not. I mean, it has come a long way since you were forcing FSR or RSR, whatever they called it.
Whatever they were calling it.
Deep Rock Galactic. All right, we have a voicemail here, which of course you can submit if you support us at the proper tier on Patreon.
Hello, Tom and guest, or Tom and Dan, whoever is listening. I do have a question. If Apple had stuck with AMD, but dedicated graphics, i.e. they didn't switch to ARM in 2020, and they continued on with AMD up until now, or technically a couple years from now as well, would we have seen big RDNA 4?
So basically he's saying if they didn't design their own chips and they did, because, even after they made their own Apple CPUs and APUs, they were using, I believe, Intel 28 core Xeons or even 56 core Xeons in their Mac Pros. And then they would still use, remember that custom dual Vega thing? It was actually a custom chip for Apple. It was interesting. The most powerful Vega chip, only usable in Apple, it turns out.
I mean, my gut reaction would be probably. I mean, that's a huge client.
Yeah, right. Like if they kept using AMD GPUs and they didn't make their own CPUs, yeah, I mean, probably big RDNA 4 would have been something for Mac Pros. I mean, I think that's entirely plausible that they were focused on that.
Maybe it like with Vega, it would have just been exclusive again, but yeah, probably.
Or it wouldn't have been a dedicated card. They would have only made the APU version.
True.
Yeah. Probably not, but maybe. I don't know. PC Dog writes in and says, Tom, I just realized that today marks 3 years that I've been following Moore's Law is Dead. I just wanted to say thank you. Yeah, and I mean, let me see here. Where are we at in our cycle? That's right. We are just past 6 years of doing the podcast. It will be episode 364, where we will celebrate 7 years. Good Lord.
Jeez.
I'm getting old. I hate that. 7 years. Dan, to make this feel even scarier, that means that to get to 10, well, obviously, it'll be 520 will be the episode. We are almost 2/3 of the way to having this be a 10-year show.
Well, I'm sure we're going to get there at this point.
I think so. I think we will get there at this point. Now, what's scarier
disastrous fashion, Dan walks off on episode 384 of all episodes.
If we got to get to 1,000, to break off 1,000, we would be doing this for 20 years. And yeah, I would be like 50. Ugh.
Be like,
I hate this.
46 probably, or 46. Something like that, because I think
I said
I was
like
20.
50. I'm tired.
Like 22 or 23 when we started this to reveal my age.
Yeah, but that is crazy. I think we might be able to get there, though. We'll see.
Not that I'm pretty sure people could have figured out my age by now, but I am approximately 30.
Approximately. Like a quantum cloud of age. You can only approximate it. But yes, I mean, look, joking aside, I mean, me and you have actually talked about this before. Like, we think that we'll probably do this for a very long time. Like, let's say I eventually have kids and like I get busy and I get more tired and I'm like, I can't do as much work. I still think we would do the podcast at least every week, if not every other week, and then just do less of the other videos. And then if Gerard chop it up more into more cut down yields, because even if I was to go into like semi-retirement, I'd want to keep up with the tech, and then I might as well do a podcast because it's fun. And so I think we would still do this, you know. It might be every other week, or it might just be the only thing we do. Like, or it could just be like we do a broken silicon one week, die shrink the next one to support the Patreon, and then just Gerard chops that up into 20-minute videos, and like we just put leaks in the podcast. But I think we'll be doing this for a very long time, and you know, we hope that you will still be around, PC Dog, watching, and as well.
Yeah.
But I am exhausted. I think this has been another fully featured. Feature rich, fully baked, not a beta. You got the full game version of Broken Silicon. I want to thank everybody, of course, for watching and to listening to it. Again, make sure that you're subscribed to Moore's Law on YouTube. Ring the bell button. Comment down below. I'm sure there's none of the opinions we put out today anyone will disagree with any of them. But joking aside,
and we're right about everything. So,
but joking aside, we would love to see what you think. And on top of that, join the Patreon. Actually, I should mention, because he was in this episode as well, the next guest will be Steve from Hardware Unboxed. We've already scheduled it. So if you want to ask Steve questions, actually the very lowest tier of $1 and the 128-bit tier, $1.28, you can ask Steve questions, get access to at least a die shrink every month and a back catalog of dozens of essential episodes. And then higher tiers, of course, can join the Discord, ask us questions, talk about this episode after it comes out with me and thousands of patrons. Yeah, so support us there. Support us, a podcast app of choice. Give us a review for Broken Silicon. And check out the last video. Watch the AMD Zen 6 Medusa Halo full like specs leak. I mean, that thing is the next Zen 2 moment. And share it as well. Don't let YouTube bury that one. Don't let them. All right. Any final words, Dan?
I don't think so. I'm going to go retire into space.
Dan is going to now drift into space, and I'm going to drift into eating pasta for dinner. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, everybody. Have a good rest of your week.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carbon Cry and Carrie No Sugata as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie No Sugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guests questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes in Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, Z Jits, Daniel D, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, Aaron Close, Jan Ranner, Toka, Daniel Hyde, MJB1, GZ Ziggy, SES Chalmers, Jerem Ferriera, Compressed AI Blocks, Falcom Alev, Jensen Wang, Gregorius Acker, Sarcastro, Chris Rich, Evan Dingle, Hal Buma, Shredbird, Miss Sammy Molas, The Boss Haas, Chrysantine, Tommy, Jonathan, Jake223, Jake Martin, Amiable Chief, Slicky, I Should, Gamers Unite, Meat and Pork, Ian Clifford, Tim Robb, Travis Gooding, Mad, Zootsu Taylor, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cakes, Stephen Coates, Mark Mitchell, James Anderson, Mark Raidmaker, Coal Addict, Win Wang, Cameron, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Reginald Ari, Teak Autumn, Windstar, Little Germany, James I. Raider, Shay, Milton, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Justin Bustle, John Swin, Austin Haggerty, Joe Foot, Brian Scanlon, Harlan, Jansen Angima, Joseph Kelly, Slushpaw, Brian Wright, Sisyphos771, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, Thalo215, Alex Vega, Michael Cozy, Crystal Joe, Elbergun, Keekum, Celerized 80, Sprutnik, Brian P, Hudat42, Cornster671, Pentawinta, State Farm Snake, Hal Richard, Omega Doge, John Wick Boomstick, Mr. Tiger, Hugo Ander Kiwi, Penguins, Love AI, Porcelain Oats, Matthew Cassells, AI Soldier 789, Curry King 3, Nixus Mania, Bespoke Exclamation Point, Smash Axley, Fred Borger, Karim Al Masri, Rai Hill Chi Bowles, Kevin Kuntz, Armand Vacatura, Man Nolis Ragkusis, Callan Reichel, Jonathan Harris, Daniel Martagano, Elusive Man, Kianush Kagani, Johnny Trans, Zabur Ahmed, Bjorn Toft, Josh, Angel of Cake, and of course, as always, thank you to Sahara for the music.